In this next video and the next part of your worksheet, we're going to combine the two transformations A and B, so determining amplitude and period from an equation. So if we look at this first example, we've got y equals 3 sine 4x. So amplitude, don't forget, is the absolute value of A. So the A value here is 3, so this graph is going to have an amplitude of 3. Period is always 2 pi divided by the absolute value of B, so it's going to be 2 pi divided by the B value, which is 4, which is going to make the period pi by 2. Now the key points, again, that's just sort of, something I do to make sure that I can graph these. And what you do is you take the period and you divide by 4, which I want you to keep in mind is taking the period and timesing by a quarter. Those are the same two things. So if my period is pi by 2, I'm going to times that by a quarter, and that makes my key points every pi by 8. Okay, so I want you to try to go through and now do what we just did for the next 3 equations. Okay, so for this one, the amplitude is 1/2. The period is 2 pi divided by a quarter, which is the same as 2 pi divided by a quarter, which is the same as 2 pi times 4, which is 8 pi. If my period is 8 pi and I need to fit in 4 key points, then my key points are going to happen every 2 pi. That'd be a very stretched out graph. Okay, the next one, the amplitude is the absolute value of A. So the absolute value of -5 is just 5. The period would be 2 pi divided by B, which is 2, which would leave me with a period of pi, which means my key points would have to happen every pi by 4. For this next one, the amplitude is the absolute value of 2, which is just 2. And then the period is 2 pi divided by B, which is 1/2, which is the same as 2 pi times 2, which would happen in 4 pi. To get my graph to happen between 0 and 4 pi and squeeze in 4 key points, those key points would happen every pi. All right, now let's do a graph. So now we're going to graph y equals 2 sine of 1/2 x. So first thing, scale. What's the scale of this grid? This is another pi by 4 scale. The amplitude of our graph is going to be the absolute value of A, which is 2. Maybe you should pause the video and give this one a go, or just keep listening. The period is going to be 2 pi by 1/2, or 2 pi times 2, which is 4 pi. My key points, I'm going to be every 4 pi divided by 4 key points is going to be every pi. Okay, how many grid lines is it going to take to get to pi? Well, pi is 4 grid lines, so it's 4. Or you could do pi divided by pi by 4, which gives you 4 grid lines. Domain is -infinity to infinity. Range, we haven't done that in a bit, so it's going to be -a to a, and so it's going to go from -2 to 2 inclusive. Ooh, funky bracket. Okay, so how do we graph it? Well, now we're going to look at the fact that this is a sine graph, not a cosine graph, so I'm going to start at 0, 0. Then, now my next key point is 4 grid lines, so in 4 grid lines, my next key point is going to go up to 2, because my amplitude is 2. And then in another 4 grid lines, I'm going to go down to 0, and that's all that fits. In the other direction, I'm going to go left 4 grid lines and down to -2, 4 grid lines back up to 0. So we're only really seeing 1 cycle of the graph because of the scale. And of course the graph keeps going on forever. So my assumption is if you reach the end, you know it's going on forever, but I know some instructors are really picky about arrows, so I'll draw some arrows, but I probably won't remember it all the time. So this is the graph of y equals 2 sine of 1/2 x. Hopefully it felt okay. So now you can go and practice worksheet number 9 to 11.